Hey everybody, good morning. So Paul Pardew, Army Contracting Command this morning. I will walk you through what ACC is doing for Army readiness and Army modernization. I'll give you a quick overview of the command, some of the aggressive things we're trying to do for readiness and modernization. I have 5 of my 6 center directors in the front row, so raise your hand. ACC Warren, Rock Island, New Jersey, Redstone, and APG. I'm only missing Orlando, so if you see Joe Junta, throw him to the front. So they'll be available after this, or if there's a question I can't answer, they'll jump on that one. So they may be having technical difficulties, but if you can go to the next slide, the agenda. I think I hit those, and then next slide to the ACC mission, which is largely delivering readiness through Army contracts around the globe for Army land operations and joint force requirements. Our vision is to sustain Army readiness and support modernization, and we do that in 3 different ways, right? So ACC is composed of 6 centers that largely do the weapon system contracting. A lot of you will be interested in that discussion. Then we also have a mission installation command that does the installation commands, and then we have 8 contracting brigades arrayed around the globe that do a lot of the mission support forward. So with that, next slide. Here's a little bit of a laydown of where we're located. Like I said, we're a global organization. The Army Contracting Command at the end of this fiscal year did $69 billion, which $69 billion out of the just short of $95 billion across the Army. So we're the big player. And then when you look in the lower left, 73% of what we do is for the Army, and then there is some federal spend and some DoD spend for other services that we may be the lead for that effort. And then look over at the number of contracts. So we did 151,000 contracts last year. The number one question I get asked is, how long does it take to put a contract in place? Procurement acquisition lead time is a topic of discussion. That's part of the reform discussion that we have. I will tell you the answer there is, on average, across those 151,000, the number is about 170 days, right? But then if I break that down by bits and pieces, I can show you stuff that we do in hours, and I can show you stuff that takes a weapon system, that takes a lot longer depending on the complexity. Next slide, please. So, moving forward, we have this thing General Perna has given us called Shape the Fight. We're looking to reform how some of our centers are structured, how's my center structured, so that we can get after Army modernization and readiness. We can be more proactive. For those of you that may have been dealing with my centers over the past year, you've probably found that they have a lot of draft RFPs that go out. We have a lot of RFIs that we deal with. They are directly engaged with many of you to try to figure out what is actually within the realm of the possible as we go forward on Army modernization. I'll talk to a little bit more on that when we get to the OTAs. And then, increasing organizational efficiencies. One of the things I've been spending time here at AUSA is on definitization of contract efforts across ACC's operations and with specific contractors.
One last reminder.
I'll let that go first.
10:30, Warriors of the Workforce. We're holding a panel discussion on transition from military to civilian life. Professional HR recruiters in the booth. That's booth 261 at 10:30.
I didn't know it was going to go that long. So on reform, so the Army has contracts that have money sitting on them across multiple years. We are now chasing those dollars down to return them back to the Army. If you listen to anything that the Secretary of the Army said in the past 2 days, we've got to make sure we're using every nickel appropriately. At the end of this past FY18, we were running through all the unliquidated obligations that we could get so we could return it back so FY18 dollars could be more efficiently used, and we returned $125 million back to the Army. But we have multiple years to do that across. One of the things I have asked my organization to do is shift to a contract admin and a consistent contract admin to get after those type of things. One of the other things we've been asked, and it started with Mr. Kelly, the DUSA, is data analytics. We did not have a data analytics cell. General Perna has spent a lot of time asking us how we see ourselves, where's the contracts. where the contract spends, can we get after more strategic sources to be more efficient across the Army? And so for those of you that may know anything about LogCap, Eagle, some of those contracts, those are strategic sources. We're trying to use those more so that you have a consistent contract that you can get to. There is any number of other levels of analysis we're doing across installations to look at what you have going on at one installation and then another, and are the services the same, and does it lend itself to a strategic source for the United States Army? And then category management, which is an effort within the department to get after your portfolio of spend and trying to better manage it across services. And so we're working through that as well. Next slide. Quick picture slide. Nothing too exciting here, other than to say it's going to be a balance going forward on modernization and readiness of FAR-based and OTAs. OTAs have been the flavor of the month for the better part of a year, or flavor of the year. And I'm going to show you the contract spend right. I think it's the next. Go to the next slide. Okay, it's the one after this. So, key tenets of modernization for those of you that have been listening to the secretary and the chief. You know, the strategic priorities, they're not changing. The number one things we spend our time talking about is readiness and modernization, and how any effort I do within ACC is tied directly to that. But that takes an engagement with industry. You know, when we come up with next generation ground combat vehicle, what is that? What are those requirements going to be? Dan Gallagher and ACC Warren just have started a second round of industry engagement to get after, hey, is it a bright idea, or is it something within the realm of the possible that can eventually make it into a requirement for a prototyping OTA? So that level of engagement is going to help us going forward. Let me talk a little bit about how we're laid down to support Futures Command. There was a time where we thought potentially parts and pieces would be directly given to Army Futures. I think that's still a possibility at some point. But right now, the going in way we're aligned is we have a headquarters cell right now that's largely about 4 or 5 people. They will be down in Austin. Right now, they're doing TDYs back and forth. And then for every CFT, I have 2, you know, what I would call, you know, all-star baseball players aligned to every CFT. Now they come out of my centers. They do TDYs back and forth as needed, and they're largely working with the center. That is the, you know, what I like to tell them is, hey, the center is the way the contract and the OTA will get let. That's where the legal, the policy staff, and all that is there. But those 2 people that are aligned to the CFTs, they're intended to help with requirements generation and take the vision of the CFT and translate it into something that the centers can get on contract. The other thing about the CFTs is they're largely aligned. You know, ground combat system is aligned with TACOM Warren. You know, anything that's aviation is going to John Mays and RSA. And so, in my view, if you think about how ACC is laid out, the Army Futures Command has 2 people on those CFTs, but they can get themselves into a larger command that has capabilities across APG, that has a lot of communications and that you know, IT type stuff. You know, so if you have that on a helicopter and it's another part of the system, they have some expertise to share and work those equities. So that's how we're arrayed right now. We'll see how it works. The effort I've given, or the guidance I've been given from General Perna, is they are priority 1. It is a no-fail mission, and so everybody I put against that effort is you know, an A-team player. Next slide. So I had my folks run the numbers. Normally I don't spend a lot of time talking dollars and actions, but the point of this chart was I wanted to know, from last year where we announced Army Futures, where were we, and what was the Army doing with OTAs, to where we are today. And what you see is, you know, last year, you know, the Army was still the big player in it, but if you get to today, you know, 2.9 million, we've effectively, or 2.9 billion, we've effectively added another $1 billion in the past year. But here's what I would tell you about OTAs. It's, you know, my responsibility as the Army Contracting Commander to make sure that what authorities we've been given with OTAs stay within those authorities. while it's a very quick way to prototype, it's a very quick way to bring consortia and non-standard players to the game, we can't get outside of those authorities because Congress is watching us. You know, hey, it's great, 2.9 billion. You added another billion in a year. You're doing a great job. But if we get outside of the box on this, that tool will be taken away. And so I spent a lot of time talking to my team. I talked to General Ostrowski this morning about this, and you know, OTA is good, and we still have some learning to do. One of the questions I was asked yesterday was, hey, when you go to prototyping, at what point, how's your decision making going to be as you go to production to FAR-based or continue on with the OTA? And a very good question, which you know I didn't have a great answer for because we haven't quite got there on some of these larger systems. So, next slide. Hey, look, every OTA is they're not a cookie cutter. They come with each and every one is a little bit unique. They do take time to negotiate, especially with non-standard Department of Defense contractors, and that's actually probably true of FAR-based too, because it's new. You're dealing with the government. We have our processes. We have our ways of doing business, and that does not exactly translate to you know the regular business community. You know, draft OTAs. I think this has been one of the things that has worked out the best. If you look at the FARA acquisition that was just announced last Friday, that draft OTA went out several times, and it was industry that made comment on that. And so when ground combat vehicle or any other of these Army Futures efforts go out, it's really important for you all to give us feedback. Because otherwise, you know, that solicitation may go out and it's something that is not executable. And so the feedback on these drafts are critically important to how we're going forward, and I think actually make the long-term effort a lot more successful. And then I think I hit on the piece with consortia and non-standard. And with that, I'm at questions. Yes, sir. So, not Paul, I'm going to pick on you. So, we solicited, or we did an OTA, right? And, sorry. What we didn't put in the original solicitation was that we wanted to take it to production. And then when it went through its life cycle, and we down selected and what have you, we then wanted to take it to production, and it was protested. Now, originally we all thought, you know, OTAs are not protestable, except this one was effectively protested because in the original upfront solicitation of that OTA, we hadn't talked anything about protesting. So we were just rolling along. And so they said, hey, that's not fair, right? That you never said you were going to do that. And so now the thing that I see strategically with OTAs is you have to know exactly where you're going to go up front, or at least build the capacity within it so that when you get downstream, hey, it's going to be FAR-based, or hey, maybe not, or you know, you don't get too far outside of it. You guys have any other examples potentially on that question? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak a little bit to options that PMs may have if they want to get some type of performance data that has been removed from the OTA due to FAR and DFAR, and they want to try something more innovative and creative that doesn't have to fall within the MIL standards?
A little bit closer,
Okay. Can you speak a little bit about PM capabilities that PMs may have if they want to use an OTA, but the DFAR and FAR have been removed from the OTA, but they want to get performance data, but they don't want to fall into MIL standards. They want to do something more creative or innovative with industry and use maybe data that they have.
You guys want to take a stab at that one? Dan? Yeah, I still can't really hear the question up here. I'll wave you up, it'll be easier.
Can you speak to options that a program manager, a government program manager may have if they want to use an OTA,
Right.
but DFAR and FAR have been removed from that agreement, but they want to get performance data from a contractor, but they don't want to be subject to mill standards. They want to do something more creative or innovative, maybe use
And
more
not,
industry.
and not give up the data?
Right.
All right, you guys, Paul?
I think what you need to see is whoever you're contracting with through that OTA, if they how they have the data available, and so work that out in the terms of the contract when you award it, vice some mill standard, right? So I would go to what the commercial practice is, what the standard practice is in the industry, see if that works versus laying on some mill standard, right? I hope that helps.
Does that answer your question? Yeah, I'll hang after. Oh boy. I know him, I can say that.
Phil Kwong with Intelsat General. Just a question about what's your technique to go ahead and break down a silo approach to make sure that the entire team is talking? Like, for example, comms and networking applies to both the rotary wing platforms as well as the next generation combat vehicle. They're going to be critically important. How do you make sure that the whole team is talking and that the contracts are there to go ahead and cross support those?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the beauty of Army Futures, right? I mean, what they're trying to do is build systems that are interoperable, right? I mean, what we don't want to do is, I'm going to build a ground combat vehicle that can't talk to the future armored reconnaissance vehicle. And so what are those systems? The real question of Army Futures and the PEO structure is, how does that all get synced, right? And that's, I think, part of what Dr. Jetty, General Murray, and General Perna are all working through. And then how do you make sure that there's synchronicity across all the systems, and they don't become divergent, right? Yes, sir.
I'm curious how you integrate friends and partners from around the globe into this process, both to take advantage of the capabilities that they bring, but also to ensure the integration process. So we're very good at being able to talk, well, fairly good about being able to talk amongst ourselves, but then we want our allies to execute things. We have problems integrating them into our warfighting model. So we have that challenge all the time, and we need to try and figure out better ways to force that integration.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, in theory, that's what USASAC does. And I think we're better with some allies than we are others. Like, you know, with the UK, I'm sure we're pretty tight. But what if you're going to roll in, you know, I'll just say the South Koreans just because I don't know. But I mean, how far along are we in integrating anything that they may want to, you know, have in similar system, right? Yeah, it is a big problem. It is, but it's not unknown, right? I think we do recognize that, and you know, with what we're doing in Korea, you know, that pops up from time to time. How are we communicating? How are we communicating air defense? How are we communicating? Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not just comms. Right. I was going to say, I'm here all week.
Sir, Cami Stinson, AP&T CFT Logistician. You were just talking about transitioning from the OTAs to different types of funding. Is there some plan, different types of contracts?
Right.
Is there some plan for lessons learned that's going to come out in the near future for the CFTs? Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things we don't have yet, to answer your question on the collecting up lessons learned, the answer is yes. My contract ops cell, that's one of the things they do. One of the other efforts that we're trying to get after is I need some kind of formal education program for this. Because right now, the pros are largely in New Jersey, and what I've had them do is propagate out and advise across my command until I can get, you know, a Defense Acquisition University or some kind of effort going, and actually use some of his talent to help get the initial thing going. And so I've already started those conversations. Yeah, so that it doesn't become a one-time deal. Like, hey, we're going to do OTA for 2 years, and then boom, it's gone, and the budget gets, yeah. This is going to be a long-term effort.
Sir, Nancy Lyons. There's a lot of discussions about modernization, but we seem to lose visibility of sustainment. Is that going to be factored in when we work with AFC from a contracting standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion between how, we haven't seen this yet, right? We're only in the first year. How does AFC take a system, we'll take next generation ground combat vehicle, and then how does it go into the PEO structure for sustainment? That's one of the discussions, right? Yeah, exactly. Part of me says AFC should remain in the prototyping and getting after the science and technology to build systems. But then once that system is awarded, it goes over to sustainment over in the PEO structure. I think that's the going in idea. But just like anything new that you try, we may find out that there's some synergies between the two and some things that we got to do to, logically think through multiple commands that you're going to have to, hand off to sustain long term. I know I don't think it's fully lined up exactly right now. Craig, no questions? Good to see friends and family. All right, like I said, I'll hang around for a little bit. I'm here through tomorrow. If you need to talk to me or one of my center directors will hang over here to the side and answer any questions, or if we didn't clarify anything, come see me. Thank you.